Hey guys, so I just finished reading this book here, An Indigenous Peoples History of the United States. And I wanted to give my thoughts about it as far as being a Native American, but also a Latter-day Saint. There's a bit of confliction between the two, and I'm kind of on this journey to rediscover my Native heritage while also balancing that with being a Latter-day Saint. And this video is more about the broad idea of what's in here, which is basically colonization and genocide. I just wanted to share all the thoughts that have been coming to me as I've been doing this. This book really opens up your eyes, so I do recommend it. The power in it is just kind of overloading you with all of these disasters and tragedies, and then explaining how they happened and what resulted from it. And it's broad. It goes over kind of um, in chronological historical order from the first Native Americans here to the first Europeans, and then to the West, and then even beyond to overseas stuff. And so I just wanted to share my thoughts about this in this video, and then in future videos, we'll go more in depth about a lot of these things. Okay, so I know the word colonization is kind of like a trigger word now, or a political word on both the left and right. But I live here in Utah, so I get a lot of conservative people pushing back against it. And I don't exactly know why. I'm guessing a lot of it has to do with kind of this like patriotic identity that a lot of us have grown up with. And to hear someone push back against this identity and point out flaws, people start to get offended about that, and then they push back as well. I just want to let people know that I don't think anyone here is a bad person or that you're responsible for what happened in the past. There's a good quote from this book, though. Let me find it here, that I think makes a nice point. It says, "The late Native historian Jack Forbes always stressed that while living persons are not responsible for what their ancestors did, they are responsible for the society they live in, which is a product of the past." And I thought that was pretty neat. We're not to blame for what our ancestors did, especially in Utah. I'm taking an angle kind of more honed in at Utah pioneers, and there's a lot of people here proud of their Utah heritage. We're not responsible for some of the bad actions they did, but as a society, we should start to recognize some of these things instead of um, suppressing them or not telling them or pushing them aside and focusing on the other stuff. I think both sides need to be told. And I'm a Latter-day Saint, and I'm a filmmaker, and I have done a lot of travel with some great scholars and historians who are also members. And I've been taken to places as far as Saudi Arabia. I'm going to Israel soon. I've been to New York, Palmyra, Ohio, Missouri, Hawaii, and other places related to church history. And as I've been doing it, I've been noticing that the Native perspective hasn't really been told. And I started noticing this maybe like a year or two ago. And at the same time, I was kind of coming to terms that I'm a Native American. I grew up here in Utah, and the way I think is more the culture of Utah. But I started coming to terms with the way I look. There's a reason people make jokes about me being a Native American. When people see me, a lot of times the first thoughts are, is he Native? Is he Hispanic or whatever? And it's taken me a while to kind of come to terms with that and realize, okay, that's actually a huge part of my identity, and it's time to actually start exploring it. So that's why I'm on this journey here of reading books like this and stuff is to really dig into it, but at the same time noticing that it's not being told in the Latter-day Saint community as much. And an example of that is the new Saints books that came out. I think they're great, wonderful storytelling. There's, I think, 4 volumes. The first volume is about Joseph Smith and all the history in the East. But the second volume is mostly about Brigham Young and the history here in Utah. And I have heard about or I've been reading about like the Native American and Latter-day Saint conflicts, especially here in Utah Valley. That's where I am. And so I opened this book trying to see if they mention it at all. And it just glossed over this event. It mentioned one little battle that wasn't part of the main battle. And it just wasn't there. And that was a bit surprising for me. I think I am trying to get more of these stories put in the history books because they're actually major events. Like here in Utah Valley, where I am now, I keep looking out the window because I could see the mountains right here. But this was full of Native Americans, and our history completely changed by pushing the natives out of this valley. So I'm kind of here to try to tell that story, but I also just want to say that I'm not here to tear down the church. I am a member, a believing member. I've had to kind of reorganize things in my head of what I believe and what I don't believe, because of all this stuff. And I'm still on this journey of discovery and learning. It's kind of interesting because there's all types of people around me uh, who have different perspectives and ideas and maybe even agendas. You have BYU scholars telling me one thing from one side. You have secular historians who might be upset with um, my support of the church. You even have Native Americans coming at me from this angle who aren't too happy with a more scientific approach that I take versus a traditional approach. You also have members who might think I'm anti-Mormon or something, and I'm not like that. And I've been a believing member my whole life, and I just want to make these stories known and really come to terms with our history. Because the more I'm reading this, the darker it is. And we're going to get to the book soon, but again, this video is just all the thoughts that have come up because of topics like this that I'm just getting out now. But a fun example of what I'm doing is the movie Thor Ragnarok. It's always been one of my most favorite movies just because of the comedy. I love it, but after reading this stuff, I kind of saw the message they were getting at, and it was probably obvious for everyone, but it finally hit me. Is Thor realizes that his people's history, Asgard, is built on uh, colonization and genocide. So in the movie, Thor looks up at the ceiling and he sees that there's a mural up there, and the mural was a depiction of Hela and his dad taking over other colonies. Thor slowly starts to realize that the prophecy of Ragnarok was more a consequence of their actions than it was a simple prophecy that he could simply stop. And throughout the movie, he slowly realizes that he has to just let it happen. And now I'm not saying the church has done anything that horrible. I know people will disagree with that, but on the scale of Thor Ragnarok, nothing that bad. And I'm not saying the church is going to crumble and that we have some type of uh, coming to consequence coming to us. But I do like the point that the movie makes. And at the end, Thor realizes that Asgard is not about a place, but it's a people. And that struck home to me as a Latter-day Saint because we believe in Zion. And for a long time, we've thought Zion was a specific place, but there's continuing research that Zion has been moved around. And if you look at the uh, latest references to Zion and in the Doctrine and Covenants, it's the Lord kind of removes the idea that it's about a specific place in Missouri. And then he says that Zion is about the pure in heart. And that's the belief we have today as Latter-day Saints. Zion is about the pure of heart. It's the same as what Asgard is. Zion is about caring for other people. And that's what I'm doing here. I just think we need to deal with this dark history to become better people and to help others. Okay, so finally back to a bit about this book. Again, sorry, a lot of this is just kind of the thoughts I'm that are evolving in my head. One of the biggest themes about this book that I liked is that it kind of just goes into massacre after massacre after massacre. And I know it doesn't even mention every massacre because I've been studying a lot about the Utah Valley massacres that happened here. So this goes over major ones, and it goes over, how they started, what happened, and consequences of it afterwards. And I think that is a powerful way to tell this story. As a video maker myself, I think eventually what I want to do one day is a video that um, just kind of goes over every massacre in order, kind of like a list with a map perspective and a timeline without necessarily um, shoving an agenda down someone's throat, but just going over the details. Because if you put aside your politics and just see it that way, like what this book kind of does, is then you just are like, wow, this was horrible. This was bad. I can't believe we did that. I can't believe I didn't learn about that. It was a major part of our history. We wouldn't be here unless we did all of that. So I kind of want to make a video about all of that. But that does bring up a pushback I get online a lot, is that, hey, Xander, why do you only focus on the native issues, the native massacres, and don't focus on the massacres against whites by natives? Native people were just as bad. And you know, there is a point that both sides did bad things. But there is also a point that from their perspective, they might feel like all this woke agenda is being shoved down their throats. But I think the other point is that while this agenda seems to be being pushed down our throats in the last, I don't know, century or so, I don't know, for hundreds and hundreds of years before that, what was being pushed down people's throat in the 20th century, in the 19th century, in the 17th century was that Native Americans were savages and they needed to get their land taken away and they needed to be civilized. And that was the dominant narrative. And now there's this new narrative coming up that uh, white people are horrible. And I don't agree with that. But I do think there's a point in the middle. And I do think it does lean more towards the idea that uh, we there's bigger things to deal with on the Native American massacre side. And it a lot of people push back and say Native Americans weren't peaceful natives. That's what we sometimes call it, peaceful natives. That idea is completely false. And while I agree that natives did bad things too, I think it's kind of a way to just not deal with the other false narrative that settlers were a peaceful people. And taking it even a bit deeper to our faith, that saints were peaceful people, that that Utah pioneers were a peaceful group. And for me, that narrative is the strongest here. I mean, we have a special holiday called Pioneer Day, and that's the dominant narrative here, but it leads to certain things. Pioneer Day is not a special day for Native Americans in Utah because that's when they started getting pushed out of their land. Saints got Zion, natives got reservations. And that kind of narrative leads to books like The Saints not necessarily tackling the Utah Valley massacres that happened here. And so I'm kind of in the middle again with arrows and guns pointed at me from every side, and I'm more concerned about just getting the history told and then us dealing with it. And again, it is surprising that a lot of this is political. I wish it wasn't. I wish we could just deal with the topic colonialism and study it and apply its lessons without these politics getting involved. I imagine it's different if you live in a democratic state, that you are tired of all the woke stuff, whereas I live in a conservative state, and so I'm surrounded more by the peaceful saints narrative. And so we're maybe operating under different worldviews here. I wish it wasn't that way, but again, I'm not trying to say that Latter-day Saints were evil people. I think Latter-day Saints are good people, and I think there are many good Utah pioneer Latter-day Saints as well. And I think they should be recognized on Pioneer Day, but maybe the other pioneers should be recognized who came into this land as well. And so I'm not trying to bring down fellow saints or fellow members. Um, I'm mostly pushing back against a narrative here, and I'm trying to balance it with a narrative here. And I think that by doing it, we'll have a better, cleaner picture of things that'll just help us become better people. And I've lived among Latter-day Saints my whole life, and I know that they're good people and that they want to learn and embrace history and learn its lessons and become more of a Zion like pure in heart people. So that's really what I'm just doing here. I hope all that makes sense. So, sorry, back to this book. I probably won't be sharing a ton about this book. I got lots of notes and stuff in it for shorts I want to make and videos I want to make. But really, this has just brought up the thought, the ideas of colonialism, and that's probably its purpose, anyways. And I think that's an important discussion for Latter-day Saints. But just little things that stuck out to me. One thing was scalping. Uh, I grew up thinking scalping was a Native American practice. I didn't realize, like how this book points out, that scalping was also a white settler practice, that they would go out and scalp natives and bring the scalp back for money, for a reward. So they were incentivized to scalp and attack Indians. Uh, Other things like I I know that most Native Americans died from disease. I didn't fully realize that there's accounts where generals in the United States would actually practice germ warfare, where they would specifically give diseases to groups of people to bring them down to Native American people. Another thing I didn't realize, but thanks to this book, is just how strong the settlers were in general. Settlers compared to the United States Army and the Federal Army. Settlers were a strong group of people and a strong group of militia, and they slowly started gaining this militia experience. And that's what was used to fight off the British and for the United States to become independent, is these groups of militia that would become so organized that they could take all this experience from Britain and then use it on Native Americans, use it to gain Native American lands. And so it kind of became this growing force, and the government would actually kind of use it to go out and attack other lands. They realized that sometimes it's better to use the settler force. And it even lasted to here in the West, where you had settlers in different areas that were kind of like outposts that slowly started encroaching on Native American lands. And the book actually, one of the biggest things the book tries to make, biggest points that this book tries to make, is how all this settler experience and then all this federal government experience, all these generals and colonels fighting in the Indian Wars, that experience started building over time and then expanded beyond the United States into the United States exercising power overseas and then having their own settlement bases scattered around. And one term this book likes to point out a lot is we see evidence of how the Indian Wars shaped the United States military in general by some of the key terms they use. So it points out how when um, a United States Army goes into enemy territory, they call it Indian territory, which is a term they adopted from the Indian Wars. And it points out how, at some points there were tens of thousands of Native Americans in the army, and the army was insensitive about using this term, but it's just an example of how colonization has worked and spread. I don't know if they call it Indian territory today. They might call it in territory, the shortened form of it. But it's just one example of how this just grows and points back to um, all this colonization and genocide. Now, again, I'm not going to go through this whole book. More videos to come, hopefully. And I appreciate everyone for watching and supporting this kind of journey. But one final point or thing I want to make is, as I was reading this book, um, feeling depressed about everything that has happened and kind of getting overloaded with all of these things. I opened up the Book of Mormon after reading and was like, okay, what does the Book of Mormon say about this? And I know a lot of Latter-day Saints love to focus on the verses that seem to defend or promote the idea of the Europeans coming to the Americas and taking over the land, as if it was God's approval. But I want to just point out, when you do study stuff like this, colonialism, you start to unlock a new perspective on the Book of Mormon. And then you start to see that there's verses that actually condemn this. And there's one section in Second Nephi or in First Nephi. Let me check it out. Okay, yeah, there's one second section in Second Nephi. I think it's 26, where Nephi is having this vision, and he sees his people being destroyed, annihilated, basically genocided by the settlers coming into the land, the Gentiles coming into the land. And we don't always see how Nephi reacts to it. And then some of the commentary after it and how he actually condemns it. So some verses say, directly after Nephi is talking about this genocide and about the Gentiles doing it, this verse says, "And the Gentiles are lifted up in the pride of their eyes, and they have stumbled. They preach up unto themselves their own wisdom and their own learning, that they might get gain and grind upon the face of the poor." And for me, when I read that, the face of the poor, I see Native Americans being abused. And there are also secret combinations, according to the combinations of the devil, for he is the founder of all these things, yea, the founder of murder and works of darkness. And he leadeth them by the neck with a flaxen cord until he bindeth them with his strong cords. And for me, maybe these strong cords are part of what we're trying to unloose on us in a decolonization effort here. But after Nephi warns of their murderous ways and talks about how the Lord is against all of that, Nephi then says, "For none of these iniquities cometh of the Lord, for he doeth that which is good among the children of men. And he inviteth them all to come unto him and partake of his goodness. And he denieth none that come unto him, black and white, bond and free, male and female. And he remembereth the heathen, and all are alike unto God, both Jew and Gentile." So this might feel contradictory to my conservative friends, to my secular friends, and even to my Native American friends. But I think the Book of Mormon has a lot to say about condemning colonization. And that I think by studying colonization, a whole new perspective gets unlocked about this book. And we can start using it to help out. Again, I know that's contradictory to especially a lot of my secular friends who think this Book of Mormon is a colonization book, but it is a way to read it, and there are answers to deal with it. And one of the next books I'm going to read is Mormon Settler Colonization: Inventing the Lamanites. And I'm excited to get into it. And I just want to say that a couple years ago, I might have read this more um, as a defender of the faith, but now I'm finding value in this. And I wish we as Latter-day Saints could find value in just the topic and not be afraid to learn from it, because there are points made that I think we need to kind of come to terms with and learn more about. You know, what does it mean to be a Lamanite? When we as saints call Native Americans a Lamanite, are we taking away their own history and their own beliefs and their own stories? Is that something we need to hold back on? What does it mean when a temple is named after a tribe that we forced out of the land and that is currently suffering with their identity? Um, when what does it mean when we have wards and stakes named after that tribe? Uh, there's things we kind of need to start dealing with and untangling, and there's insights to be made. Again, I'm on this journey. Things are slowly evolving along the way, but I am enjoying it. But I am being surprised by all of it. And if anyone wants to help donate for me to get some books or something like that, there's a link in my bio on YouTube, I think, that you can use to help me out with that. This is going to be a long journey, but I think, like Thor, Thor Ragnarok, we can slowly start to deal with the past and work on becoming a stronger people, a stronger Zion. Thanks, bye.